everybody. My name is Chase Bradshaw. I'm the owner of Mint Condition Lawn Care, and today I'm here to talk to you about what I think is quite possibly the most underrated attachment of all time. This right here is a 4-in-1 bucket, also known by some people who are wrong as a clamshell bucket. It's a fairly simple design. It just uses a hydraulic third function of the tractor. It runs to hydraulic lines and some cylinders back here that open and close the triangular part of the bucket. Now, the reason this is called a 4-in-1 bucket is because it being able to open actually adds 3 additional functions. So it works as your standard bucket when it's closed, but when it's open like this, you have a dozer blade, a scraper here, and when it closes, it works as a grapple, and this one actually has teeth. You can see right here, it's got teeth here to help clamp down on logs and brush and all that. So today I'm going to demonstrate all of the functions of the 4-in-1 bucket, the advantages of this tool, some of the disadvantages to using this over the attachments that are actually made to do these jobs, and who this tool is best for. So I'm in the cab of the tractor now. I'm going to fire it up, and the first function that we're going to demonstrate is just the function of the standard bucket. So we can see here, I can use my hydraulic third function to close this clamp and make it a standard bucket. And then, just like a normal bucket, all I have to do is put my tractor in gear, put the bucket on the ground, and push into this pile right here. And we have ourselves a nice little scoop. Now, some of the advantages to using this as a standard bucket as opposed to just using a standard bucket, my personal favorite is that you can actually open it to dump it. Now, where this comes in handy is if you're loading a dump truck or trying to pile your dirt up really high. Typically, when your bucket's all the way up here, you would have to tilt it into the bed of the dump truck or onto the top of the pile. But this way, you could actually just raise it up like this, right over top of your dump truck, and open your bucket up, and it all falls out just like that. Now, the disadvantage to using this as a standard bucket, as I'll demonstrate here momentarily, is that when you have your bucket closed, you can see you have just a little bit of a gap. And that gap there will let water through. So you cannot carry liquids with this if you want to use it as a standard bucket. But really, that's the only disadvantage to it. If you're going really fast and you don't have it tight, you might lose a little bit of loose material. It's not airtight, but that is not going to be a major cost. Now let's talk about the second function of this bucket, which is as a grapple. We're going to back the tractor up and open up this bucket. And as you can see in front of me here, we have this log. And all I'll have to do is drive right into this log, lower my bucket on it, and pick up the log. Now, where using this bucket as a grapple comes in is where there's really a lot of disadvantages compared to a normal grapple. While it is nice not having to switch from a bucket to a grapple, as you can see here, this bucket pinches it between the bottom and that lip instead of pinching it in an actual grapple. So you're not going to be able to pick up logs anywhere near as big, and you're not going to be able to carry as much brush as a standard grapple. It also obviously doesn't have the teeth of a root grapple style, so you won't be able to use it as a root rake. But it's very useful in a pinch and for picking up small limbs, and it's very nice if you're in the field and there's a limb down, you can just pick it right up. It's also a lot better than a grapple when it comes to picking up a mix of dirt and organic material, because when you're picking up both, you can push into the pile, or you can grab the top of the pile, pull the organics, and then push into the pile and scoop up all of your dirt. But it's not a substitute for a real grapple if you're going to be doing land clearing or tree work. But if you just have a small hobby farm, you're like us, you only put about 50 hours a year on your tractor, and you're not doing a lot of tree work, this is a great way to save a little bit of money on a grapple. Now let's talk about the third function of the 4-in-1 bucket, which is a blade. So when this bucket is opened all the way up, it clearly makes a blade with the scraper piece on top. And all you have to do is put your bucket down on the ground and push with it, just like any other blade on a skid steer or on a dozer. And as you can see, I was able to push out that pile and spread it into this hole much more efficiently than it would have been if I had to just move it scoop by scoop. Now, the advantages of having this blade on here, the main one is that when you're grading with it, you can just open it up. If you want to use a standard bucket as a blade, the only way to do it is to fill it with dirt first, which adds a bunch of extra weight and decreases your pushing power, which is especially a big deal for a tractor like this. With that open, I can just push. I don't have to worry about it. Now, let's compare this to a couple of different styles of blade. First, you have your rear blades for a tractor, which would be your box blades, your scraper blades, your land planes. Now, this is good for pushing bulk dirt out, but you're not going to be able to do quite the level of fine grade work that you can do with a box blade or with a scrape blade. Now, that's mainly because of visibility. With a tractor, you have a lot less visibility over the hood to see this bucket. You can really only see the edges of it. Whereas with a scrape blade, even though I'd have to be looking behind me all the time, you can see the whole blade. You also have the advantage with a scrape blade specifically of being able to angle it side to side, which you cannot do with the blade on a 4-in-1 bucket. Now, on a skid steer, I think there's a lot more advantage to grading with a 4-in-1 bucket. Because on a skid steer, you're not going to have a standard bucket on the front and a blade on the back. So it's very nice to have a bucket that you can turn into a blade when you need to push a lot of dirt without filling up your bucket. The only real blade alternative for a skid steer is a 6-way dozer blade attachment, which is extremely expensive compared to a 4-in-1 bucket. Now, they do work great for pushing bulk dirt. You can move a lot more with them than you can with a 4-in-1 bucket because you don't have that clamp on top that's limiting your pushing capacity. But this is a much better budget option, and you don't have to switch between a bucket and a blade constantly. You just have one attachment that does it all. Now we're going to talk about the final function of this bucket, which is as a scraper. Now, this is my least used function of this particular bucket. But if you open your bucket up, like so, and tilt it like this, you can lay it in the grass, put the machine in reverse, get that lip in the ground, and scrape off the grass. And then you just clamp it in there like so. Now, this feature, some of you may say, the blade does the exact same thing as that, which is kind of true. The blade is very useful for scraping off grass. And with a skid steer, I think I would almost never use the scraper function. But with a tractor, I find it to be very useful. Because with a tractor, when you put that blade in the ground and push forward, you're pushing not only the dirt directly in front of you, but everything under it and behind it and in front of it. So it puts a lot of strain on a tractor, which isn't really designed specifically for loader work. It bends your loader in weird ways, and over the long course of time, that's going to damage your loader. Now with a skid steer, sure, slam that blade in the ground, scrape the dirt off. But I find this to be a very useful tool for scraping sod with a tractor. So now I'm going to hop out of the tractor and I'm going to talk to you guys about who I think this bucket is really for. So as I've demonstrated, this bucket has a lot of different uses as compared to a normal bucket. So who and what do I think this is best for? Well, I actually don't think that this is necessarily best for a tractor like this, because this tractor, if you look over here, this tractor uses a skid steer quick attach, which means all I have to do to remove my bucket is pull these levers and release those hydraulic hoses. So it's very easy for me to switch between attachments on this tractor. I could have a grapple and a standard bucket and a whole bunch of other attachments and switch between them very easily. And I could have a blade on the back. So while this is extremely useful on a tractor like this, it may not be worth the money if you already have a grapple and a box blade or a scrape blade and a standard bucket. However, where I do think this is very useful is number one on skid steers. I think this is one of the best grading tools you can put on a skid steer, because unlike a tractor with a skid steer, you don't have the luxury of having two attachments at once. So being able to have something that can scoop dirt, push dirt, scrape topsoil, and pick up any obstacles in your way is a huge advantage. Even though it's easy to switch attachments on a skid steer, it does take time, and a 4-in-1 bucket on a skid steer is a huge time saver. I hesitate to say that this is the ultimate grading tool for a skid steer, because I know there's the hydro buckets out there that have the rotating drum on the bottom of them, and obviously if you want to spend a lot of money, you can get into a 6-way blade for one of these. But I think as far as bang for your buck goes, this is the best grading tool for a skid steer, coming in at only about $3,500, which is a whole lot cheaper than a 6-way blade. I think it's close to half the price. The other place I see this coming in really useful is what we used to have these on, which is tractors and backhoes that do not have a skid steer quick attach. If you have a machine that doesn't have a skid steer quick attach on your farm, be it an older tractor or you just wanted to save a little bit of money on a new one, I think this is the ultimate tool for the front of your machine, because you can't switch attachments easily if you don't have a skid steer quick attach. You're, for the most part, stuck with whatever attachment is on there. So if you have an older tractor with a third function and a standard bucket, I would highly recommend switching to a 4-in-1 bucket, because not only will it let you move dirt around, but you have your blade, which means maybe you need to push a little bit of dirt and your bush hog's on. Well, now you don't have to take your bush hog off and put your box blade on. You have a blade right here ready to push dirt. And obviously, if you have a standard bucket, you don't have a grapple function. You're maybe picking them up with the lip of the bucket or cutting stuff up and throwing it in the bucket. This, as a grapple, while it is not a substitute for a real grapple in clearing applications, this is the ultimate tool for the front of a tractor that you cannot change attachments on because of that grapple function. There's a tree laying in your field, you don't have to cut it up, you don't have to try to finagle it onto the lip of your bucket. You open this up, you grab it, and you go. So it really, really is like having 4 attachments in one on a machine that you cannot easily switch attachments. Now, there's one other thing that I want to demonstrate that I truly think this bucket is the best tool for no matter what, and that is pulling T-posts. As you can see over there, I have a T-post in the ground. Nobody likes pulling T-posts. You have to sit there and wiggle them and try to pull them up, and it's a huge pain. This, unless you have an excavator, is probably the best tool for pulling T-posts, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is. So what you want to do when it comes to these T-posts, you just want to come up on them like this. Get it to where your blade is just barely touching it. And then just bring that bucket down and very, very gently pinch it. Now, you don't want to squeeze your third function too hard because you don't want to damage the post. But just a very gentle squeeze, a little bit more, and it pulls straight up. And you can go along an entire silt fence and pull up every T-post like this, lay them on the ground, and then just go along the fence and clean them all up. This is, for taking down silt fence, the best tool I have ever used and the only one that I want to use for it, other than maybe a mini X with a thumb. So there you have it. That is the 4-in-1 bucket. What I, in my opinion, believe is the most underrated attachment on the market. You can find these for tractors of almost any size, skid steers, backhoes if they have a skid steer quick attach. But I will say, if you're buying a backhoe, buy a backhoe with a 4-in-1 bucket. Because for some reason, backhoes won't adapt skid steer quick attach for the most part, and this just makes everything with a backhoe a little bit better. Although really, just don't buy a backhoe. But if you're going to, buy it with a 4-in-1 bucket. Even if I had a grapple and a box blade and a scraper of some sort for this tractor, I would still rather have a 4-in-1 bucket than a standard bucket. And certainly if I had a skid steer, I would tell him to leave the standard bucket right there at the dealership and give me one of these instead. That's how much I like these buckets. But tell me what you guys think. Do you have one of these? Have you used one of these? Are you thinking about getting one of them now? Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.